Hi, everyone. My name is Danny Katz, and I'm the Executive Director of COPERG, the Colorado Public Interest Research Group. And we're here today to learn a little bit more about what the Colorado Public Utilities Commission is. And I am joined by Rebecca White, who is the Director of the Colorado Public Utilities Commission, or PUC. Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, Danny. Great to see you.
So the idea here is, I think, we at Coperg as a consumer watchdog, we do a lot of work across the state, and some of the work we do it does involve the PUC. But I was thinking, a lot of people out there probably don't know too much about the PUC or even know the breadth and depth of all the things you all work on. And so I thought it'd be helpful to just take a big step back and just tell people a little bit more about the agency and what you all do and where you are in the grand scheme of things here in the state of Colorado. So thanks for joining me, and thanks for diving in. We're going to talk a little bit about what is the PUC, who makes up the PUC, why the PUC matters, and then some of the big things that are coming up in 2012, including ways for people to get involved.
Great.
So, do you want to just start like big picture? What is the Public Utilities Commission and what are the issues that you work on?
I'd love to. And I'm so grateful for the chance to talk to you today because one of my objectives in coming into this job is to build a broader awareness of the Public Utilities Commission. There's a lot of reasons why we are an agency a lot of folks don't know a lot about. We tend to be pretty bureaucratic, but I think we play a really important role in a lot of the lives of Coloradans. And the more we can get out there and talk about what we do, I'm hoping the more people will come to us and tell us what they think. Um,
Absolutely. And there's so many different things that you all work on. I think that's
yeah,
one reason I wanted to talk to you. I mean, there's just so many issues that you cover.
there are, and really divergent ones. But I'll start with a bit of history. So the PUC is actually about 114 years old. But even before we were a Public Utilities Commission, we were a railroad commission back in the 1800s. I believe before Colorado was even a state, because railroads were some of the first industries to come into Colorado, right? And pretty much a classic example of a monopoly where you had a very powerful business operating in the state, and it was recognized that there needed to be some oversight of that to protect folks. So we grew from a railroad commission to becoming a full-fledged public utilities commission, again, about 114 years ago. And most people know the PUC. If you know the PUC, you probably think of us for one of two reasons: utilities, your utility bill, your
Right.
Excel bill, your Black Hills bill. And maybe you know us actually because of towing, which is a completely separate area that we regulate. But and that is because over time, our authority has sort of grown as the legislature has said, you guys are sort of uniquely fitted to help regulate in this space. And our kind of sweet spot is often where there's a monopoly or a certain amount of sort of market control. Taxis are a good example, and that has changed a lot over years with Ubers and Lyfts. But back in the day, taxis were an example where you could have a very powerful industry that could perhaps take advantage of people.
Sure.
Utilities, sorry, I'll let you interrupt.
Yeah, yeah. So you've got utilities, you've got taxis, you've got towing.
Yep.
What else do you work on?
We still do heavy rail. So back to our roots as a railroad commission. In fact, with a bill that passed last year, we're getting back into heavy rail safety. So we're
Mm,
now standing up a whole inspection program that will go out there and look at track, look at locomotives, look at wheels. You know, what we're ultimately trying to prevent is if there was a major derailment, to try to prevent a derailment, and certainly one of the scale we saw in Ohio, right? We never want to see that happen in our state. So what can we do to have a safe system? And then how can we respond if there was an incident? So we have rail, we have
moving
um,
trucks.
moving trucks,
Okay.
we have limos, we have sightseeing, we have Ubers and Lyfts, as I mentioned, as well as things like hop, skip, drive. We have natural gas pipelines. So we have a whole safety program around inspecting a whole series of the pipe network, and it really picks up with the distribution lines and transmission lines that sort of move gas after it's been processed, all the way up to where it reaches the meter at your home.
Mm,
So a lot of gas moving underground in our state that we want to make sure stays in the pipe for many reasons, environmental as well as public safety.
sure. And then telecommunications too, right? Do you still have
Thank
some of
you.
that?
Some of it, not near as much as we had in the days of Mama Bell. So now our telecom program is pretty interesting. We have a 911 program.
Hmm.
So we have a 911 enterprise where we work, they collect a small amount of money and try to support 911 training and the centers out there. We have a deaf and hard of hearing program where we connect hard of hearing folks with resources so that they can make phone calls and hear what's on the other side. And our most recent telecommunications program deals with incarcerated persons. Because with a bill that passed a couple of years ago, folks who are in correctional facilities are entitled to both good telephone and video services so they can reach their loved ones and actually have a good connection. But also as a state, we're moving to free services. So we have a regulatory authority there to make sure that when somebody needs to make a call or see their family, that they can do that. So pretty cool new little niche program.
Absolutely. So ultimately, the issues you work on, it comes back to usually there's some sort of monopoly, some sort of it's an industry where people really can't shop around, so to speak, and so there needs to be some entity that's watchdogging these industries and making sure whatever they're doing, you know, has some sort of public benefit or is protecting consumers in some way.
You great, great summary. Yeah, that's perfect.
Great. Well, so
Yeah.
then, so there's a commission. There,
Yep.
there are a couple of commissioners. Can you just talk a little bit more about kind of who they are? How do they become commissioners? What's their role in the process?
Yeah. So as you noted at the beginning, I'm the director. So my job is over the staff and the budget and making sure this organization sort of runs, but also I pick up on a lot of our public engagement, working at the legislature, because at the end of the day, I am not a decision maker in a lot of the policy items. That is before three appointed commissioners. So we have a three commission structure in Colorado. Other PUCs have five. Some have even seven, but we have three. They're appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate.
Okay.
They sit for 4-year terms, but they can be reappointed. So right now, for example, our chair is Eric Blank. He was just reappointed by the governor for a second 4-year term, but he has to be sort of reconfirmed by the Senate. So he's still sitting, he's still the chair, but we're waiting for the Senate to confirm that appointment. Megan Gilman has already been reappointed into her second term, and she's a year into that. So she's sitting into her second term or fifth year. And then Commissioner Tom Plant is into his first term. So he's 2 years in. So they tend, and that's meant to be a bit staggered, right? So you've got sort of a newer commissioner often and ones who've been here a bit longer. These are full-time professional jobs.
Oh,
These
I see. So they're
commissioners,
not doing anything else. Like this is their
no,
job.
yep. They're actually paid positions. They're one of few commissions that are paid in Colorado because these guys are working as hard as I do. They have as many as 50 or 60 dockets before them, and they really sit as judges. In fact, we operate much like a courtroom,
Okay.
which can be some of the difficulty in getting public engagement because, for instance, our commissioners can't talk to each other outside of their formal meetings.
Hmm.
So when you see them on YouTube and they're in what we call the Commissioner Weekly Meeting, which is every Wednesday at 9 a.m., that is pretty much the only venue in which the three of them are having a conversation.
Hmm.
We protect that very closely. We don't want them, and they're not allowed to have any conversations on the side to kind of see where they're coming out on things. They all have it out in the open, and they can't do that with parties either.
Oh.
So any party that's coming before them also comes before all three and can't advocate for a certain position before a certain commissioner.
So whatever issue it is, utilities, towing, taxis, there's a proposal, so to speak. There's like there's a question, and this commission needs to adjudicate it. They're the judges. They'll make some decision on it, and so as you said, it kind of works as a courtroom. What's your role? So you're not a voting person, but as the director, kind of what's your role, and how do you fit into the commission here?
So a big part of what I do is do we have the staff and expertise within the commission to support this? We're dealing often with, I'll give you an example. Excel has requested $1.9 billion to invest in wildfire protection in their service territory. Really important case with a whole lot of money. So my job comes in, do we have the expertise on several different parts of our commission? I can talk about how we have an advocacy arm within the commission as well as the advisors, but do we have the economists, the engineers, we have certified professional accountants? Do we have all that mix? Do we have the budget we need to do this work? How are we talking the public about those proceedings? Because the commission can't get out there and really give talks on what's before them on their docket. They need they can receive public comment,
Right.
but
They're the judges.
yeah. So then but I can do that. I can go out and talk about, hey, here's this big plan. Here's what this means. Here's how you should get involved, interface with the legislature on that. So I kind of pick up and sort of fleshing out the rest of the commission to make sure we're both are operating inwardly the way we need to do as an organization, but also functioning within a larger Colorado state government and a society and knowing and making sure our stakeholders understand what we're doing.
And so you mentioned a little bit, it's kind of like a courtroom. So you've got, again, you gave the example, Excel might be one entity that comes forward and they have this proposal around wildfire mitigation. There are other groups that can be, I think, what are called interveners. So they can be kind of part of that courtroom and ask questions and insert information too. And then your staff are kind of taking that information in, they're getting it to the commissioners. How else does the PUC staff sort of operate in that kind of courtroom scenario?
So I'm glad you asked that because this is a really important part of the way we function that most people don't know, and I don't know why they would, right? So we've got about 100 staff, but about 20 of those folks are almost walled off from the rest of the commission. There's actually a physical wall here with the door, and they are called our trial staff. So that is a team of economists, experts in executive compensation, CPAs, engineers. And when a case comes in, and I'll use the wildfire mitigation plan as an example, in my words, they sort of tear it apart, right? They go through it based on their experience, and many of them have done this work for decades. Say, what is the utility asking for here? Is this the right number? How do I find out how they got this number? Essentially what they're trying to figure out is, are these the right costs to be passed on to ratepayers?
Right.
So they come up with an independent recommendation to the commission that also sits along with any other party who comes in. So if COPERG wanted to intervene, you would come with a recommendation to the commission. The Utility Consumer Advocate, which is another state agency. And so we have, that way we can assure as a commission, there's always at least one entity digging really deeply into this. And again, sort of tearing it apart and giving the commission a perspective. And then we hope, and it works this way, that a lot of other parties come in too.
Yeah.
So that's one part of the commission. We have a other staff that works for the commissioners and helps them digest all this material.
Gotcha.
Summarizes what's before them in the case, what everybody's saying, and kind of works with the commissioners. So it's a beautiful system, I have to say.
And correct me if I'm wrong, in state statute, there's sort of missions, there's responsibilities. So like the commission, when it comes to utilities, there's a set of things that the commissioners and therefore the staff you were talking about who are participating in the process, there's a set of things that they're supposed to be sort of looking at this through a lens that they're looking at this through. Costs might be one, or how much does it impact? How much does it help us hit our climate goals? Those sorts of things are sort of set by state statute for you all to use.
They are, and that's really important because part of this whole construct, and if we talk about electric utilities, for example, they are private companies, and they are entitled to earn a certain profit. That's part of what we call the regulatory compact. Is they agree that they'll come into Colorado. They will commit to serving the customers that were within their service territory. They can't say, I'm not going to serve someone. I don't feel like turning on the power to X neighborhood or X citizen. So they agree, we're going to invest in the system and make sure everybody receives power. We, on the other hand, agree that they're entitled to a certain amount of profit by doing that. And so much of that is then in the middle ground, right? Of arguing over, well, how much profit? And is that the right amount to be put on ratepayers versus what should be on your shareholders? And that's where it gets very complicated very quickly. At the end of the day, if I was to pick three terms for what we do, is do we have a safe system? Is it reliable? And is it reasonably priced? And that is sort of the framing why we broadly approach all these cases. but there's some very specific statutory language. Like you noted, we have climate objectives now and trying to get to 100% renewable energy in Colorado, and that comes with a cost, and we need to help utilities reach that objective, but do it in a way that's fair for ratepayers.
Sure. So safe, reliable, reasonably priced, that's helpful. So I
Yeah.
got to ask, I mean, you probably didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to, when you were 5 or 6 or 7 and say, I'm going to be the director of the Public Utilities Commission. So kind of what motivated you to want to be in this position? How did you get here?
It's like most things in life, but an opportunity pops up that you weren't quite anticipating and you jump at it. But I've been a public servant since I was out of college. I did AmeriCorps as my first job, then went to graduate school and went right into federal service. So I've been working at the federal or state government since I could articulate thoughts. And I'd come from about a decade or so at the Department of Transportation, the CDOT here, was looking to kind of get back into more true environmental regulation work, which I came from the EPA. I had known that the PUC had a really influential place in climate, which we do. It's not as well known, but a lot of our emission reductions we're achieving in Colorado are through the electric power industry, and I just thought it'd be an interesting thing to go jump to. So
That's great.
here
And
I am.
you're in your second year now?
Yeah, second year. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Well, so we talked a little bit about this already. I don't know if there's much else to say of just why the PUC is important. I mean, you went back to, ensuring that we have a safe, reliable, reasonably priced system that mostly the PUC is there in places where there's a monopoly or an industry where a consumer is just not going to be able to just shop around. It's not as easy as just having an open marketplace. So it seems like we've kind of covered that. Any other things you want to say about just why the PUC is important before we get into some of the big things coming in 2025?
Yeah, I mean that really hits on it. I just want to stress again that affordability. I have felt a lot in coming into this job, just how much a utility bill can make the difference between someone having sort of a stable budget for their household and getting into a situation where if they pay their bill, they suddenly are trying to figure out how to cover food or cover rent. So that is a really important mission for us. And part of the reason we've spent a lot of time also on trying to take care of people who can least afford to pay that kind of bill. I mean, that's where we really do need to be stepping in. And there are programs out there, but I think of last weekend, right, when we had the cold weather snap. And so many of us in Colorado remember Storm Uri and the very high bills. And there's a lot of protections in place now. But there's just a lot of work in that space. And we see it a lot with natural gas in the winter because that's an international market
Right.
commodity that can wildly swing depending on a war in Ukraine, a cold weather snap sort of across the US. It's one of the benefits to going to electrification as we kind of get away from that volatile commodity. But I just wanted to stress that that's a big focus for us is recognizing the affordability part of what we do.
Right. And then that kind of goes back to where the staff are so important. I mean,
Yeah.
affordability, we're talking massive math calculations and other things to go into deciding whether a particular industry proposal, how that's going to impact and what the consequences would be. So it makes sense. I didn't quite realize 100 staff, but you have a lot of people who are helping to make sure that these things are safe, reliable, and affordably priced. So that makes sense. Um, Big things on the plate. So I guess, all of this is kind of theoretical until actual proposals come
Yep.
through. 2025, I assume there's some big stuff on the dockets for the PUC. So what are some of the things that people should be aware of coming up this year?
Huge stuff before us. But as I've noticed in this job, this is always the case. But let me just tell you what's sort of the focus for this year. So, a big proceeding that the commission's been working on for a while that's going to make a big impact on a lot of people in Southern Colorado is Black Hills has asked to raise their rate for their electric business. So they want to essentially charge their customers more. They haven't come in with a rate case for 6 years, so this is a pretty big deal. We've had 4 hearings and received hundreds of comments. So the commission is going to make a final decision on how much to approve for Black Hills and then how much goes to ratepayers. So that'll be a big one this spring. Another big issue before the commission is time of use rates. And if you ever want to do a second YouTube interview on time of use rates, I'd love to talk about why that's designed, but it essentially, we have that in place now for Excel customers where you pay a little bit higher for your electricity during very peak hours. There's a lot of good reasons for that, and your bill is offset by much lower rates in the off-peak. But there's a lot of strong feelings around time of use rates and how that impacts people. So that's before the commission to look at a different set of hours and charges for time of use rates.
Okay.
I mentioned before the wildfire mitigation plan, big one before the commission. You know, we always look to California and what happens and feel so awful for the fires that state has seen,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and trying to figure out what we need to do as a state to ensure that we don't have incidences like that. And so the Excel has come forward saying that, you know, if they're allowed to spend this amount of money, they think they could shore up the electric system, and we need to figure out how much of that makes sense. Another big proceeding before the commission, it's called the Just Transition Plan. But
Okay.
as we close down the coal-fired power plants in Colorado, we need to figure out what fuel source we're going to. And part of the reason it's sort of labeled Just Transition is recognizing that there is a workforce and an economy built around the coal plants. And so it's not just moving to a new fuel source, but it's helping communities transition and be kind of held whole. So there's a plan before the commission right now from Excel on just transition related to the Comanche closure in Pueblo. Also, as we electrify more as a state and more people buy EVs, that means we're using more electricity. That comes with its own cost to sort of build out the distribution system to deliver all that extra electricity. So what's called a distribution system plan is before the commission right now. And essentially, Excel has come forward and said, we would like to spend quite a bit of money, many millions of dollars and billions to build out that system. And so the commission will be deliberating on that.
When you say distribution, are you talking about like the wires that we see running into homes and
Yep,
businesses?
exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And the substation, so everything to bring the electricity down from the transmission lines all the way to your home.
Got it. Okay.
Lots of investment that's needed to do that.
Yeah.
We are also doing a lot of work on equity. We had a legislation in 2021 called Senate Bill 272 that required the PUC to consider equity in all of our work. So everything from taxi cabs to towing to utilities. So we'll be opening a rulemaking this year to try to understand and put in place what that means for us. How do we look at proceedings differently if you apply an equity lens? On more the transportation side, we'll be looking at more work on rail. We're looking at right now whether taxis should be allowed to increase their fares. They haven't done that in a while.
Okay.
And then we'll be looking at pipelines, especially with some changes in the federal administration. And it looks like a big rulemaking that was with the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration maybe falling apart at the federal level. We need to figure out where in the state what we want to do on pipelines. So
wow. All right. Well, that's a lot, and guaranteed everyone would have an opinion about something that you're working on. I mean, this is absolutely going to affect people across the board. So important for folks to weigh in. There's a lot of ways people can participate in the Public Utilities Commission process. I think to me, it's sometimes there's so many different ways. Sometimes it's hard to know where to start. I know we talked a little bit about the more technical way, so groups can get together and be official interveners and kind of be a part of more that courtroom proceeding, and so that's always open for every one of these dockets. But for somebody who just they're not looking to intervene in that technical way, but they still want to provide their views and comments and get their neighbors and others to provide views and comments. What are the best ways for the public to engage in this process?
Sure. I'm so glad you asked this. This is one of the most important parts. And as I sort of describe this, I want to say I'm working on making this even easier because it is hard to engage with us. Although I rattled off, half a dozen big things before us, that is in the context of probably 60 plus proceedings, right?
Right,
So
right.
to come into the commission and try to figure out where do I find the wildfire mitigation plan. That's
Hmm.
part of what I'm trying to work on. But so two basic ways that we sort of invite people to participate. Any sort of major proceeding we have, we will have one or more public hearings. We've been doing those sort of at the shoulder ends of the day, usually from 4 to 6 or 4 to 7, so we can catch people who may want to join us after work. Those have largely been virtual, but we are trying to get into communities like we did with Black Hills. And so we'll send out press releases and say we're having public comment hearings. And those are pretty typical where you have 3 minutes and you talk to the commission and we record all that. We have a court reporter. We also will take public comment in writing. You can send us something the old fashioned way, send an email or even leave a voicemail in any language you choose and we'll get it translated. The only key is to at least reference what proceeding you're talking about to the extent you can get the approximate title. To
Gotcha.
try to make this easier, we have a place on our website called Key Proceedings, and that's where I'm trying to put that the set of cases that we think are probably most interesting to the public.
Hmm.
So certainly the ones I mentioned and many more to try to cut through all that is before the commission and help focus the public. We issue a newsletter. I'm trying to get out there more and talking to you
Right.
and the media. So
Right.
I say this and I'm very open to ideas
Right.
on how we can be more accessible because that's a big goal for me.
Right. And because ultimately the decisions, I mean, these are judges, they're weighing the equivalent of judges, so they're weighing lots of different information and things. Ultimately, there's no math that says, oh, one comment will equal this or that. But I guess could you just speak to, how important is it for these commissioners to not only understand from a technical standpoint that a proposal may increase something by a penny for every month bill or something, but just also understanding what it means to people living out in Colorado. How important is that real life storytelling?
I think it's so important. I mean, we will cover the paperwork on these proceedings, right? I'll have the economists produce the reams of paper that sort of break down the utilities proposal. But I can't tell you the power of, and I saw this in Pueblo when we were there for the Black Hills hearings, of having someone come up to the microphone and say, I can barely afford to pay my bill. Like
Right.
just letting the commissioners hear that real life example. We had Sister Nancy in Pueblo came forward and she helps people pay their bills down there and was able to talk through the examples of several families she helped. So providing that human face to what can easily become a very number-based exercise, I just think is invaluable. And I really value that people take time out of their day to do that. That is not easy. I don't know in my personal life that I show up at many public hearings. I'm tired at the end of the
Right.
day. So
Right.
when people take that time, we try to really honor it. And the commissioners do listen.
That's great. Well, we'll take this interview and if anyone's watching this, I'll embed this with a blog post. So we'll include some links to places where you can find some of those proceedings and figure out, instructions on how to submit comments on the website and
Great.
all those sort of things. With the last minute that we have here, is there anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to bring up? I think we got through most of the agenda I was looking for here.
I think we did. I'm so grateful for you taking the time and posting this. So I hope it broadens some knowledge base of folks on the Public Utilities Commission and that we hear from some more people. But at the end of the day, we'll be here regardless.
Right. I
Um,
guess one question did come up. Even if there isn't a proceeding, if there's problems that people are having in any of these spaces, a utility space, a taxi space, do you have some sort of, for lack of a better term, complaint system? So a way that somebody can just sort of say, hey, I've got an issue. I don't know if you're dealing with this, but I just want you to know about it.
oh, Danny, I should have said that myself. Yes, we have a consumer affairs group that does this for a living. Last year, they got $176,000 in refund for consumers.
Oh, wow.
So I'm so glad you said that. If your utility bill looks odd, you have a question about why you're being charged so much, you can't get a hold of your utility, call us. If you were towed and you think that tow wasn't right, call us, file a complaint. Moving truck, any of the industries we regulate, we have a team of actually criminal investigators who will go out. They even do sort of undercover operations where they'll pretend to be customers of towing or taxis or Ubers and Lyfts. But we rely a lot on people telling us what they're hearing, and that's a big part of what we do. And I'm so glad you mentioned that because yes, it says file a complaint on our website, so please take advantage of that.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking this time, and we'll work to get this out. And for everybody who's watching, please do get involved at the Public Utilities Commission. It's really important, and it's definitely affecting not just you, but your neighbors. So thanks for watching, and check out the information we have on our website.
Thanks, Danny.